My name is Agnes Weston. I am 63 years old. On a Wednesday evening in October, my daughter drove up my driveway in Millhaven, Tennessee, left the car running with the door hanging open, and walked into my kitchen still wearing her hospital scrubs with her name badge clipped to the pocket. She did not knock. She never had to. But the way she stood there that night, jaw tight, eyes red, voice shaking, that was new. His family called it off, she said. The engagement, done, because of you. I was standing at the counter. I did not move. You went digging around in their business, and you couldn't just leave it alone. I finally had something real, Mom. Something good. And you took it from me. I let her say everything she needed to say. When she ran out of words and just stood there breathing, I walked down the hall to my home office and opened the closet. On the top shelf, behind a stack of old tax manuals and a box of Christmas ornaments, sat a green canvas accordion folder with a button clasp on the front. I carried it back to the kitchen and set it on the table between us. The moment my daughter looked at what was inside, the color drained out of her face. Her hands went still at her sides. But there was something she did not know that night. Something the Langford family had spent the better part of a year making sure nobody in Millhaven would ever discover. That part was still coming. Welcome to Brave Mom Stories, where ordinary women find the kind of strength that doesn't make noise until it has to. Millhaven sits in the Cumberland River Valley in Middle Tennessee, Stewart County seat, population just under 14,000. The kind of place where the hardware store still keeps a jar of peppermints on the counter and the local paper runs photos from every high school basketball game. I was born here, married here, buried my husband here, and raised my daughter here. I have never wanted to be anywhere else. I work for the Stewart County Assessor's Office. My job title is Senior Business Property Assessor. What that means in plain English is this. Every year, businesses in the county file a declaration listing their taxable personal property, equipment, machinery, furniture, fixtures. My job is to review those declarations, verify the reported values against market data and depreciation schedules, and flag anything that does not add up. I have done this work for 27 years. I carry a thermos from home. I verify numbers against depreciation tables that nobody outside my office has ever read for pleasure, and I go home at 5 o'clock. The pay topped out at $41,000 last year. I have 2 commendations on my wall and a county service pin in my desk drawer. My husband died when my daughter was 11, a cardiac event on a Saturday morning in May. He was 44 years old, and he was in the backyard pulling weeds when it happened. I found him 40 minutes later when I came outside to tell him lunch was ready. I raised my daughter alone after that. I worked my hours, packed her lunches, drove her to nursing school orientation, sat in the parking lot and prayed she would pass her boards. She did. She came out and hugged me for a long time, and we stood there in the parking lot until a minivan needed the space. I live in a white frame house on Grover Street that my husband and I bought in 1994 for $82,000. The porch sags slightly on the left side. The wallpaper in the hallway is the same small blue diamond pattern it was when we moved in. I have never replaced it because he liked it, and I do not see a reason to change something that is still standing. On the kitchen wall above the stove hangs a framed photograph from our wedding day. He is laughing at something off camera. I am looking at him. My daughter used to say it was her favorite picture in the house. That photograph was the first thing I looked at on the Monday morning after the Langford family dinner. And standing there at the stove with my coffee, I had a feeling I could not name yet. Something was not right. Not with the numbers I had seen. The numbers came later. What was not right was a look on a man's face across a dining table. And I had spent 27 years knowing what that kind of look meant. My daughter met her fiancé the way people meet in small towns. She works as a registered nurse at Stewart County Medical Center. He came in for an outpatient procedure, nothing serious, and by the time his discharge paperwork was done, he had asked for her number. She was 28, he was 31. I liked him the first time she brought him home. He shook my hand with both of his. He asked about my husband. Not out of politeness, it seemed, but because he was genuinely curious about the photograph above the stove and wanted to understand it. He ate 2 helpings of green bean casserole and asked if I would share the recipe. I said yes. She was smiling the whole time, and not the polite kind of smile. The real kind. The kind I had not seen on her face in a long time. But he came with a family. And the Langford family was not 2 helpings of green bean casserole. His father, Burton Langford, was 63 years old and ran Langford Hospitality Group, 4 restaurants across the county, a catering operation out of his flagship location on River Road, and a banquet hall that booked most of the county's weddings, galas, and fundraiser dinners. His name was on the donor wall at the county library, the Chamber of Commerce building, and the youth baseball complex. His wife, Dolores, chaired the County Arts Council and sat on the hospital foundation board. She was the kind of woman who arrives at charity events in a car that matches her shoes and somehow makes that seem like restraint. Their older son, Knox, was 35. He managed the finances for Langford Hospitality Group. He did not smile easily, and when he did, it did not reach his eyes. The Langfords had money, a name, and the goodwill of every person in Millhaven who was in a position to grant them something. When my daughter's fiancé told his parents about her, I was informed the reaction had been warm. They invited us to dinner at their home, a colonial on Harlan Bluff Road, with a circular driveway and a kitchen that had apparently been photographed for a regional design publication. Dolores told me this herself twice, on the phone. I pressed my good navy blazer and brought a jar of bread and butter pickles I had put up from the garden. Old recipe. Blue ribbon at the county fair in 1998 and most years since. I set the jar on the passenger seat and drove out to Harlan Bluff Road with my stomach tight in a way I could not justify yet. The Langford house made you aware of every scuff on your shoes. Travertine floors in the entry. A dining table that seated 12. Flowers on every surface that had come from a florist, not a garden. Dolores accepted my pickles with both hands and a smile that landed slightly left of warm. She set the jar on a side table without opening it. Burton shook my hand, brief, measuring, the grip of a man who sizes people up for a living. "So what is it you do, Agnes?" he asked over the salad. "I work for the county assessor's office," I said. "Business property tax assessments, 27 years. Something crossed his face. A quick thing, controlled, gone in under a second. But I know what a number looks like when it does not match. I had seen that same flicker on the faces of business owners who come in for audit appointments already knowing what the auditor is going to find. Dolores filled the silence. "How lovely that you've had such stability," she said. The way she said it made stability sound like something you caught from sitting too long in one place. Knox barely spoke during dinner. He ate neatly, glanced at his phone twice, and only leaned forward when the conversation turned to the restaurant business and local development. Burton mentioned his company's new project twice. Knox tracked every word. On the drive home, I replayed Burton's expression all the way back to Grover Street. I had spent 27 years looking at discrepancies in black and white on paper. That look was the same thing in a person's face. The look of a man who has just identified a problem he did not know he had. Dolores began her campaign within 2 weeks of that dinner. She started calling my daughter for lunch, without including me. She offered to lead the wedding venue search, mentioning that she knew people in Nashville, that the Langford family would, of course, cover whatever venue they selected. The projected budget climbed past $85,000. I offered $5,000. It was everything I had that was not already earmarked for the furnace. Dolores thanked me and suggested I keep it. Her tone was the same one she might use telling a child to keep a drawing she had no intention of displaying. My daughter started changing after those lunches. She came home with clothes she hadn't budgeted for, talked about the rehearsal dinner Dolores was planning, and mentioned in passing that the guest list for our side of the aisle would be around 20 seats. The Langford side. 200. I asked if I could include a few friends I'd known for 30 years, colleagues, a neighbor, a woman from church who had brought me food every day for 2 weeks after my husband died. My daughter said she would check. After a while, she stopped saying she would check and changed the subject instead. I was not invited to the venue walkthrough. I learned about the floral arrangements from a social media post. I tried to be gracious about all of it. I told myself it was her day, her happiness. But graciousness has a floor. At a dress fitting in November, Knox found me alone near the alterations counter while the others were occupied on the other side of the room. He was pleasant about it, which made it worse than if he had not been. "You know, Agnes," he said, "our father has always believed in keeping business completely separate from family. The best relationships," he says, "are ones where there's no professional overlap." He smiled. "Just something to think about." I looked at him. I understood what I was being told. I thanked him for the thought and walked back toward the others. That night, I sat at my kitchen table and looked at the photograph above the stove for a long time. Then I decided to wait and see what came across my desk. I did not have to wait long. In January, our office began a county records modernization project. 30 years of paper business property declarations had to be digitized and uploaded to the new county database system. Every business in the county, alphabetical by name. I was assigned L through P. The Langford Hospitality Group file was thick. It went back 11 years. I pulled it on a Tuesday morning and started scanning. By year 4, I stopped scanning. I went back to the beginning and started reading. Every year, Langford Hospitality Group filed 4 separate declarations, 1 per restaurant location. The combined declared value of business personal property across all 4 locations ranged from $380,000 to $420,000 over the entire 11-year period. Commercial kitchen equipment, FISIC seating, point-of-sale systems, prep tables, ventilation hoods, seating, 4 full restaurant operations barely moved in declared value for over a decade. I know commercial kitchen depreciation schedules the way some people know baseball statistics. A commercial convection oven, purchased in 2014, depreciates over 7 years and still carries residual value. A walk-in refrigeration unit lasts 15 to 20 years and holds value accordingly. 4 restaurants operating at the scale Langford's operated, based on their reported annual revenues in the county business license filings, which I cross-referenced on my lunch break, should have been carrying somewhere between $1.8 and $2.4 million in taxable personal property. Being conservative, they were reporting less than $400,000. I ran the numbers 3 more times after everyone else had gone home. The discrepancy was not an error. It was not aggressive depreciation or a category misclassification. It was systematic. Every year, every location, every line item understated by a remarkably consistent margin. And every year for 11 years, the declarations had been approved without audit by our office's previous assessor, who retired in 2022, and after him by the county commissioner overseeing our division, Chester Pruitt, who had served on the county commission for 16 years, whose daughter's wedding reception had been held at the Langford Banquet Hall, and whose name appeared on the sponsorship board for Burton Langford's annual charity golf tournament. I pulled a yellow legal pad from my drawer. I started writing. I want to be very clear about something. I did not go looking for this. The Langford file came to me because their business name starts with L and I was assigned L through P. There was nothing personal about it until I looked at the numbers, and then I could not unsee what I saw. I took a green canvas accordion folder from the supply closet and started making copies. If you have ever been treated like you were nothing by people who turned out to be hiding everything, stay with me. A few weeks after I found the declarations, I called a former Langford hospitality employee named Bobby Crane. He had worked as the lead line cook at the River Road location for 12 years. I found his name in an old newspaper article about the restaurant's anniversary celebration. He'd been quoted saying the place felt like family. I called him because I needed to understand the kitchen equipment situation from someone who had actually worked with it. I introduced myself, told him I was doing a routine property assessment review, and asked a few general questions. Near the end of the call, almost offhand, he mentioned that he was still dealing with a workers' compensation dispute. He had been injured in 2020. A commercial dishwashing rack came off its track and knocked him sideways into a steel prep table. The machine had been listed on Langford's tax declarations as having a replacement value of $150. It was a unit that cost over $4,000 new. It had not been serviced in 6 years. His injury required 2 surgeries. He still could not stand for more than 3 hours at a time. When he filed his workers' compensation claim, there were complications in the insurance documentation. The policy Langfords carried had been written to reflect their declared equipment values, the same understated values they had been reporting to the county, which had allowed them to slower premiums. The insurers disputed the claim. The case dragged for 14 months and settled for less than his medical costs. Bobby Crane had $31,000 in medical debt, a back that would never fully recover, and 12 years of his working life spent running the kitchen that made Burton Langford's flagship restaurant what it was. I thanked him for his time. I sat at my kitchen table after I hung up and did not move for a while. The photograph above the stove, my husband's face, mid-law. The following Saturday, I drove to Nashville and delivered a formal complaint to the Tennessee Department of Revenue, Audit Division. The complaint included 11 years of declarations, a comparative analysis against industry depreciation standards, cross-references to Langford's business license revenue filings, and documentation of Chester Pruitt's pattern of approval without audit. My supporting materials ran to 52 pages, organized chronologically, color-coded by year, with a summary table on the first page. The investigator who received my complaint reviewed the summary while I sat across from her. "This is very thorough," she said. 27 years of practice, I said. I drove back to Millhaven with the accordion folder on the passenger seat, lighter by 52 pages. There was no sense of victory. Just the weight that comes from doing something you know is right when you also know exactly what it is going to cost. My daughter called me on a Sunday night in February. Her voice was stripped of almost everything. "His family is stepping back from the engagement, indefinitely." She paused. "He said our families aren't aligned." I told her I was sorry. I asked if she was all right. She said yes, the way people say yes when they mean the opposite. 3 days later, she drove to my house still in her scrubs and told me it was my fault. I had been expecting her. I had already taken the green accordion folder from the closet and set it on the kitchen table before she pulled into the driveway. She said everything she needed to say. "I have already told you what that looked like." When she finished, when the kitchen was quiet except for the refrigerator hum and her own unsteady breathing, I pulled out the chair across from me. "Sit down," I said. She sat. I opened the folder. Inside were copies of 11 years of Langford Hospitality Group's business personal property tax declarations, filed annually, signed annually by Knox Langford as the company's authorized financial representative. I laid them on the table in order, oldest to newest. "They didn't end the engagement because of who I am," I said. "They ended it because of what I do." I walked her through every line, the declared equipment values, the industry standard depreciation schedules, the gap between what they reported and what 4 operating restaurants of their size should have owed in county taxes. I showed her the math slowly, the way I would explain it to someone seeing it for the first time. The understatement over 11 years represented approximately $220,000 in taxes that were never collected, taxes that funded county schools, road maintenance, and emergency services. That shortfall was made up somewhere, by other businesses, by other people. She stared at the pages. "Knox signed every single one," I said. I pulled out the comparison I had built between their declarations and their business license revenue reports. A restaurant group reporting the kind of annual revenues Langford's reported could not be operating on the equipment values they were declaring. The numbers did not reconcile. They had not reconciled for 11 years. Then I told her about Bobby Crane. She was quiet a long time after that. "You reported this already," she said. It was not quite a question. 6 weeks ago, to the Tennessee Department of Revenue. She looked at the photograph above the stove, her father's face. "They knew," she said slowly. "They knew what you could see." Burton knew the moment I said what I did for a living. That first dinner, I told him I worked at the assessor's office, and I watched his face change. He was not sizing up my salary. He was calculating whether I could eventually open a file with his name on it. She put her hands over her mouth. When she looked up, her eyes were wet. "They didn't break your heart because we weren't good enough," I said. "They broke it because they were afraid of what I could see from my desk." What I had not expected was how fast Burton moved once he learned a complaint had been filed. He called the county assessor's office and requested I be reassigned. My supervisor told me about it the next morning with her door closed. "He says you have a personal grievance, that you've been targeting his files." I was assigned L through P for the digitization project. His file was in that range. I processed it the same as every other file in the drawer. She studied me. "Is there anything the county should know, Agnes?" "I filed a complaint with the Department of Revenue 6 weeks ago based on irregularities I found in the course of that work. I documented everything." She was quiet for a moment. Then, "You did the right thing. If Burton contacts you directly, come to me immediately." He did not contact me directly. Knox did. He called my cell phone on a Tuesday evening and was politely threatening, which was its own kind of message. "Agnes, we both know how small towns work," he said. "You have a career here. There are people on the county commission who are going to remember who started this." "Knox!" I said. "I found a filing discrepancy and reported it through the proper channel. That is my job." He hung up. 3 days later, a letter arrived from a law firm in Nashville. Cease and desist. The language was designed to frighten. Defamatory conduct, interference with business operations, tortious interference. It worked for about 10 minutes. Then I called the Department of Revenue and read it to the investigator assigned to my case. "Complaints filed through official channels are protected communications," he said without hesitation. "No legal action can be based on a report you filed in your official capacity. This is a pressure tactic. We see it." I put the cease and desist letter in the accordion folder. More documentation. The following Sunday at church, Burton and Dolores were seated 4 rows ahead of me. I had sat in that same pew for 22 years. After the service, Dolores walked past without looking at me. Burton looked at me for exactly 1 second, then looked away. 2 rows behind me, Bobby Crane's sister touched my arm near the door and said Bobby had a lawyer now who wanted to talk to the assessor's office. She said Bobby had not smiled properly in 2 years. She said he was sleeping better this week. I squeezed her hand and told her I would see Bobby at the hearing. The Tennessee Department of Revenue hearing was held on a Thursday morning at the Stewart County Administrative Building. A long conference table, fluorescent lights, a court reporter in the corner. 3 state auditors with folders and water glasses, an American flag. Burton sat on the left with 2 attorneys from Nashville. Knox was in the second row. Dolores was directly behind her husband, posture rigid, hands in her lap. I sat on the right side of the room. I had no attorney. I had my accordion folder, a glass of water, and 27 years of knowing how to read a number. The gallery held county employees I recognized, 2 reporters from the local paper, and in the back row, Bobby Crane. He came in just before the hearing started, moving carefully, the way a man moves when he has learned to manage pain that is not going away. He sat down and folded his hands in his lap. The lead auditor gave me the floor first. I spoke quietly. There was no reason to raise my voice. "My name is Agnes Weston. I have been a business property tax assessor for Stewart County for 27 years. In January of this year, while digitizing county records as part of a modernization project, I identified significant discrepancies in the business personal property tax declarations filed annually by Langford Hospitality Group. I walked through the numbers, 1 year at a time. I placed documents on the table as I referenced each one: declared values, industry comparables, depreciation schedules. The auditors leaned forward. One was writing notes in the margin of his own copy. Burton's face moved through several shades before settling into something that was mostly restrained fury. His attorney placed a hand on his arm twice. Then the lead auditor turned to Knox. "Mr. Langford, your signature appears on all 11 years of declarations. Can you speak to the process by which property values were determined?" Knox straightened. His attorney leaned over and said something. Then Knox spoke. "The declarations were prepared based on our internal asset management system. We applied our own depreciation calculations. Your internal calculations produced values approximately 78% below industry standard for a business of your reported revenue level. Consistently. For 11 years. Knox said nothing. "Were you aware of the discrepancy between your declared values and market comparables?" I watched something move across Knox's face. I had seen that same thing happen in Burton's expression at the dinner table a year ago, the moment when a person is deciding between containment and collapse. Knox looked at his father. Burton gave a very small shake of his head. Knox looked down at the table. Then he said it. "The values were set by my father. He determined what numbers to put in the system, and I entered them." His voice was level, almost empty of inflection. "He told me the county never audited us, that there was no reason to be conservative." A pause. "I told him 2 years ago the gap was becoming significant, that someone would notice eventually. He told me not to worry about it." Knox looked at the far wall. "I signed those forms because I was told to. I was 24 years old when this started. I did what my father said to do." The room was very still. Burton's chair scraped back from the table. Dolores stood without waiting to be recognized. She said her husband had built his business from a single diner with 8 tables and a cash register, that the Langford family had given more to this community than anyone at that table could account for, and that this entire proceeding was the result of a county employee with a personal grudge who could not accept that her daughter was not welcome in their family. The lead auditor asked her to sit down twice before she did. Burton pointed at me across the room. His voice had gone past anger into something hollow underneath. "This woman went through our records because she wanted to hurt us. Because her daughter wasn't good enough for my son. Everything she touched is tainted." I looked at him. My hands were folded on the table. "I was assigned L through P," I said. "Your company name begins with L." Bobby Crane was called to testify near the end of the hearing. He made his way slowly to the front of the room, moving the way he had learned to move over 3 years of managing a back that would not fully heal. He sat in the witness chair and adjusted himself carefully until he found a position that was less uncomfortable than the others. He described 12 years working the line at the River Road location. He described the morning the dishwashing rack failed. He described the 2 surgeries, the physical therapy he had to stop because the money ran out, the insurance dispute that took 14 months to resolve and ended with a settlement that did not cover his medical costs. He described seeing the equipment declarations once, by accident, when he had been asked to photograph kitchen equipment for an internal inventory, and how the values listed for machines he worked with every single day bore no resemblance to what those machines were actually worth. He did not look at Burton while he spoke. He looked at the auditors. "I just needed somebody to do their job," he said. "That's all I ever needed. Somebody to look at what was sitting right in front of them." The room was quiet enough that you could hear the court reporter's machine. The auditors deliberated for 35 minutes. Langford Hospitality Group found in violation of Tennessee Code annotated provisions governing accurate personal property disclosure for county tax assessment. 11 years of underreported declarations. assessed deficiency of $218,000 in unpaid county taxes, plus applicable penalties and interest. Referral to the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation regarding the signed declarations, and Chester Pruitt's documented pattern of approval without audit. Mandatory external audit of all future Langford Hospitality Group filings for a period of 5 years. Burton sat motionless. Dolores gathered her purse and walked out without looking at anyone. Knox put his elbows on his knees and stared at the floor. I buttoned the clasp on the accordion folder. I stood, walked down the center aisle, and passed Bobby Crane's row on the way to the door. He looked up at me. Not a smile yet, but something different in his eyes than what had been there at the beginning of the morning. Her fiancé called me the following evening. He said he had known since that first dinner that his father was afraid of me. Burton had told him, after the engagement was announced, that having a county assessor in the family was a liability the business could not absorb. Knox had been managing the declarations for years, and my proximity to county records was a risk that could not be managed from the inside. The engagement was a door that needed to be closed before I happened to look at the right file. He said he should have told my daughter the truth instead of letting his family handle it. He said he was sorry. I told him what he did with that apology was between him and her, not me. He asked if she was all right. That is a question you should be asking her, I said. I was not unkind about it, but I meant it. I hung up and sat at the kitchen table in the quiet. The streetlight outside threw a pale stripe across the floor. The refrigerator hummed. I looked at the photograph above the stove, my husband laughing, me watching him laugh. I thought about what it had all been, from the beginning. Burton's face at the dinner table. Dolores and her warm smile that landed slightly to the left of warm. Knox's careful warnings. The cease and desist letter that was supposed to scare me. A man's back broken by equipment that had been declared worth $150. 27 years of numbers. 1 year of someone being afraid of what I could read in them. Chester Pruitt resigned from the county commission 10 days after the hearing. The Tennessee Bureau of Investigation opened a formal inquiry. Bobby Crane's workers' compensation case was reopened with corrected asset valuations on record. His attorney said it was a strong claim. His sister told me at church that he drove himself in for the first time in 2 years the Sunday after the hearing, parked his truck, walked in on his own, and sat down in his usual pew. I was glad for that. I was genuinely glad for that. My daughter came to the house on a Saturday morning 3 weeks after the hearing. She knocked. Actually knocked. I opened the door. She was standing on the porch in an old college sweatshirt, no makeup, arms crossed against the cold. I stepped back and let her in. She sat at the kitchen table. The accordion folder was still there, closed, pushed to one side. She looked at it for a moment, then looked at me. I said things I can't take back, she said. I know. I believed them instead of you. I know that too. She was quiet for a while, then quietly, he called me. I know he did. I don't know what I want to do with that yet. You don't have to know today. She reached across the table and took my hand. Her fingers were cold from the walk from the car. I held on. Mom. Her voice was smaller than I had heard it since she was a little girl. I'm sorry for all of it. I did not tell her it was fine. It was not fully fine yet, and we both knew it. But she was here, at my table, in the house I had kept for 30 years, asking me to make room for her again. I could always do that. I got up and poured her a cup of coffee from the pot I had made an hour earlier, still hot. She wrapped both hands around the mug and looked at the photograph above the stove. He would have had something to say about all of this, she said softly. He would have said the same thing he always said. I sat back down across from her. He used to tell me, this was back when I first started at the assessor's office and was worried. I wasn't cut out for it. He said, Agnes, the numbers don't lie. Your job isn't to make them say what people want. Your job is to read what they say and tell the truth about it. She nodded slowly. That's all I did, I said. I read what was in front of me. I told the truth about it. That is all I have ever done for 27 years. I reached over and moved the accordion folder off the table entirely, set it on the counter behind me. We didn't need it between us anymore. My daughter held her coffee and did not let go for a long time. The kitchen was warm. Outside, Grover Street was quiet, the way Millhaven gets on a cold Saturday morning before anyone is really moving yet. The photograph above the stove caught the light. The wallpaper with the small blue diamonds on cream held its ground, the same as it had always been. Chester Pruitt's commission seat was filled by a woman with 19 years in county government. Burton Langford paid the assessed deficiency in full. Knox cooperated with the state investigation and received a reduced finding in exchange for his testimony about who determined the numbers and who told him to put them in the system. The 4 Langford restaurants stayed open. Life in Millhaven continued the way it does in small towns, imperfectly, day by day, with the kind of accounting that moves slowly and is never dramatic until suddenly it is. I still work at the county. Same desk, same filing cabinet, same thermos, still assigned L through P. And I want to say this before I go, not to the Langfords, not even to my daughter, to you. If your work has ever been called small, if you have ever been told that what you do every day doesn't count for much, if someone with a bigger house and a louder name has ever made you feel like you were barely there, I want you to hear this. The person who protected Bobby Crane was not a lawyer. It was not a news reporter or a politician or someone with connections and a corner office. It was a woman who had been doing the same careful job in the same county office for 27 years, who showed up at 7:45, unlocked the same drawer, and verified the numbers the same way she always had. Your quiet work is not invisible. It is the thing holding everything up. Do it anyway. Do it right, one file at a time. That is enough. That has always been enough.